This is a tutorial on how to write a resume for our technical writing class. Now, as our first assignment, this is our real first encounter with genres. And remember, I talked about how writing the different genres is like cooking different dishes. So this is, in a sense, our first cooking dish to make. And just like with cooking, and let's take, for example, you're making chicken marsala. You know, there's a lot of different ways to do any single dish. And you can get pretty fancy with dishes, and it's actually, part of the cooking style to do all kinds of innovations. And what we're going to do here as novice cooks, we're going to just really stick with the basics, in a way be kind of rigid about certain principles and parts and things about, in this case, the resume, conscious that there's a lot of variation and a lot of possibilities for things that you can do. So for this particular essay, I'm going to be looking for you to do some particular things, and which, from my viewpoint, are aspects of a good, solid resume. So you're looking at our resume guide with features that I've provided you with, and we're going to talk first, zeroing in on the resume rules, or general rules. And the first is that you want it to fit all on one page. I'll say that again. Make it fit all on one page. You should preserve 1-inch margins. You shouldn't go any lower than 11-point font. Maybe 10 in some places, but 11-point font. And you should include a careful consistency. We'll talk about that when we get to page design. And since it's a chronological resume, you're going to actually include dates in what's called an ascending order. That means you put most recent first. For whatever, if you're listing your employment history or your education, like education, you'd put SAC up there first because that's what you're doing right now. And then in general, in the page design, you want your resume to pass what's called the quadrant test. And you can see in this little example, make it a little bigger. How there's text kind of in each quadrant. What you don't want to have in your resume is a lot of white space, kind of empty space, like the bottom of the text with a lot of white, or maybe one side. This resume has a fair amount of white space in the middle, but it's not bad. It's fairly balanced. So see if your resume also passes the quadrant test when you do get it all put together. Okay, those are just common general rules for the resume. We're going to talk next about content features. And I think what I'm going to do this is try to get the entire resume so we can look at it there. So there's certain content features that you want in what's called a chronological resume. We're not doing a skills resume, we're going to do a chronological resume. Of course, you're going to have your name, you're going to have contact information, also an objective statement, and then you're also going to include sections related to your education, your employment history, any particular skills and knowledge that you may have. This resume example has got computer skills. And then perhaps awards, activities, maybe memberships if need be. Sometimes with resumes you also include references. For our assignment, don't include references. You don't need references. And notice the order that these are placed in the text. The next one is zero in and look at some linguistic features. And we start to lose resolution here as it gets bigger. Notice that as you list your, say, with your employment history, descriptions of what you've done and your skills, that each one of those items starts with an active verb. A resume is meant to be read really quickly. It doesn't use complete sentences, no paragraphs, really tight, taut, short statements. So for this person who worked at Student Engineering Intern with Hayes, Sean, and Matthew, he worked closely with civil structural engineering professionals, communicated with clients, helped with acquiring appropriate permits, performed calculations. Notice it's starting with active verbs. That's very important. And you also want to be careful with what you put in on the descriptions of your tasks and what you've done. I think having no more than 4 items under, 4 bullets under any single item is probably as much as you can take. And sometimes the skills and activities are just assumed underneath the job titles, so you may or may not need to spell them out. The other thing to look at, and I'm not sure if this is exactly a rhetorical feature or a kind of content document design feature, but you're going to have to think about the sequence of the information you're providing. So, like, if it's a work history, it's the job title, where you worked, and the dates. With school, it's the school name and the dates, possibly your major, maybe you throw in a little bit more. How you sequence those, what you put first, is a little bit up to you. And one of the things that I encourage you to do is to look at different models for how people are managing those 3 things that you've got to list in these employment history or education. And you can go to the internet, to resume examples, and you'll see, if you Google, and even other search engines present images, and you can do an image search and just look at a bunch of resumes. Our textbook has got a few, but looking at a bunch of other ones I think is really valuable, and you can see models for ones that you think are good and how they've handled that, those 3 things, what order you sequence them, how you format them. Sometimes they're set aside a little bit in the left margin, but sometimes the dates are tabbed over. These dates are just put right in. Sometimes the dates are tabbed over more to the right. Like, I think our quadrant test, you can barely see, has the dates more on the right margin. And notice that these first items with each one are bolded. So here we're beginning to get to document design principles, and you may want to do a quick skim of our chapter 11. We don't really get to reading that soon enough because we're already writing documents, but just take a quick skim through, and I'm going to talk about a couple of the key features that are important for alignment and part of that consistency, the document design. And the first one is alignment. Notice how it's all left justified. And then when the bullets come over, it's all the same vertical alignment. These are centered. Sometimes these are left justified, the headings. But whatever kind of alignment you set up, you're consistent with it throughout. And there's vertical alignment and even horizontal alignment. So this item is horizontally aligned with that item. So think about that. It's a kind of a symmetry feature. There's also this kind of balance, as I mentioned, between left justified and right justified. Another element of document design is contrast. So what contrast does is it's a difference, and through having items that are different in there, you can emphasize them. So notice that the name, which is very important, Heather Benson, is bold. It's in bold. It's in bigger font. So you're going to want your name to be bigger and bolder. How big? Not too big, not too small. Looking at that, I'm saying it's maybe 18 to 22 point font. If everything else is 12 point, so it stands out because it's bigger, stands out because it's bold. Each of your headings are also bolded. And notice the bigger headings, the kind of content feature headings, this particular resume has them bolded in all caps. Not all resumes do that. You can do that, you don't have to, but whatever, it's going to be bold. And by having it aligned in the center, that helps it to stand out. Again, you could have that aligned left alignment. And I think that pretty much covers about the resume features and the things I'll be particularly looking for you to do. And one last thing that is emphasized in the assignment is for this one, I really don't want you to use templates that you can use. They're pretty widely available through Microsoft Word. I want you to wrestle with this formatting yourself and see that it's a little bit hard to do, but I want you to manually see how you make it. All right, so this ends our tutorial on resume writing, and I hope it was helpful.